Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Railway Conversations with Doc Frank. I'm your host of this podcast, Doc Frank himself. And my guest today is Lloyd D'Cruz from Sydney in Australia. Lloyd has a director position with Transport for New South Wales. And his responsibility is about the More Trains, More Services project in Sydney, which is about the performance improvement of the suburban train network in Australia's biggest or second biggest, depending on who you ask, city. We will obviously talk about this program and what it requires to improve the performance of a railway system. And we also talk about his career path, and there will be a lot of insights regarding career development and career planning. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, it's Doc Frank here. Real quick, I want to let you know about one of the best CBTC trainings in the world, if not the very best, but you always need to be careful with superlatives. It's the CBTC Kickstarter online course. It consists of 30 video lessons. That's the 3 with the 0. In total, over 11 hours of training content, talking about everything from the basics of CBTC, current standards, the benefits of CBTC, the key functionality of it, the supply industry, application tips and tricks, lessons learned, do's and don'ts, case studies, arguably the most comprehensive training that you can find anywhere on the topic of CBTC. There are a few additional things that make learning easier for you that you may not find on any other online courses. One of them being an immersion plan that helps guiding you through the training course and progress it in a finite period of time instead of just having it sit there for months and months on end. There is access to an online study group where you can connect with other students who are doing that training course at the time and form learning groups. There will be live coaching calls once every 2 weeks. And after the training, you will not be on your own. There is an alumni community that allows you to ask questions about the course content on an ongoing basis. So it's basically education for life. You can inform yourself about this training course and register to it on my training portal, which is docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC Kickstarter -online 2023. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC Kickstarter -online 2023. I look forward to seeing you at that training. And until then, please enjoy my upcoming episode of this podcast. Hey, Doc Frank here, host of the Railway Conversations podcast. Thank you for listening. Lloyd, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Frank. And look, really thank you for reaching out on LinkedIn. That was a post I did. I think it was 2 years it took me to get to, because I haven't been focusing on LinkedIn. But look, always brings a smile on my face when you reach out to me, because we've had a good working relationship, and I think every time we catch up, whether it's at an Ausrail or some event, we have a good chat. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks. Yes, that's basically how I wanted to start it. When we met, that was back in the year 2010. We were both working for Thales, and we were working jointly on a tender for the ATP project in Sydney, the notorious one that we ended up not quite winning. I think we came in on a glorious second place. But as somebody famous used to say, if you are not first, you are last. And that was kind of what happened in Sydney. And and maybe in hindsight, it was probably okay that we didn't win it, because that wasn't the easiest of projects. And and I think both of us have done pretty well without winning this project afterwards. Which brings me to my first point, sorry, yeah, you.
Based on that, I do recall fondly the work we put a lot of effort, to be honest, into the bid, and I think for anyone listening out there, if you want to learn quickly, jump onto a massive a bid project or a tender. That is the only way you will learn quickly. I think it was a few months. We had all hands on deck, and people flying in from all across the world to help us out. But I did enjoy it. Yeah, the result was not what we expected, but I did enjoy enjoy the ups and downs of the tender.
It was a really good time. I can remember I clocked a lot of work there. So I think my average work week there was around about between 80 and 90 hours somewhere, which is something that you don't really want to do for years and years on end. But if it's just a few months of tender activity, then that's something that you do. Quite often I was the first in the office in the morning, and I remember just shouting into the empty room, "Good morning, ATP team." And then like, I don't know, half an hour later, the next few people started to trickle in. So I think we had a great atmosphere during the time, and it was a lot of fun.
It was really good.
And it was very, very unfortunate that we didn't win it, because I believe at the time the client changed their own procurement rules in the process. Which wasn't quite okay, but I think at the end of the day they shot themselves in the foot in doing so. And well, what can you do? So the way that I perceived you, and that's how I want to start that discussion around your career development since then. The way that I perceived you when we worked together on this was that you were very curious. You were quite ambitious in a positive way, and what I also noted, which I found quite funny, is that you had a pretty good handle to make sure you get some decent one-on-one time with me by just finding out my big fondness for a good cup of coffee. So pretty much whenever you
and donuts. I was just about to say, if you recall the little greasy coffee shop down building 314 that we had at Garden Island.
It was still a better coffee than we had in our own kitchen with that commercial coffee machine there. So it was definitely good enough. And at the time, I was still quite fond of the donuts that they served with the coffee. Yeah. So and you could see this. I was quite a bit more at the time than what I have today. Yeah, even though I'm not quite as lean at the moment as I'd like to be, but back then at Thales, I had a few kilos more on the scales. But anyway, regardless, when I left Thales, you were still there, but I think after a while you left as well. And maybe you can describe what your career path was, and to what extent it was strategic, or to what extent it was influenced by your discussions with like more senior colleagues, or some call it mentors or so, if you like to elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, look, and I'm glad you mentioned about that. So, because once I joined Thales, and look, when I look back, I've got some good fond memories. I've made some friends there that I still keep in touch with today. But I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in the company. So, because you have different paths. Do I go down the technical route? And okay, if you go down the technical route, there are certain things you could do. Or do you go down there was a role called pre-sales, do you stay in that role, and then do you do the technical sales or the business development side of things? Or do you pick, I know at the time they were doing a couple of projects on ferries and a few other projects. I know the water train was still just coming up at the time. So, or do I go into project space? So I wasn't really sure. To be very open here, I was actually not sure at the time what I wanted to do. And I told myself, I said, look, I'm not going to lose anything here, right? If I pick something, I may really enjoy it, or I might really not like it, and then I can go back and do something else. And at the time, if you recall, the gentleman, Howard Parker, Axle counters was just starting up, and I think we had one small trial up in Queensland, and a gentleman we know by the name Sasanka was laboriously working on the couple of axle counters. And I said, what's this? And we went down the pathway. All right, this is a train detection system. And I looked at it, and I looked at the model, and then I sort of in my head I said, how many places in Australia has this? And they said not many. And I said, this is great. It's almost greenfield, right? And I said, what are we doing about this? And it was mentioned that, we've got a little trial going on. I said, we've got to do more than a little trial. Yeah. And that's when I sort of spoke to Howard and said, look, I'm happy to take over this role. And that's how I sort of morphed into a product manager, doing the axle counter bit. And over the next 4 years, we went from a small trial to deploying it across all the main operators in the country, including Sydney Trains with Steve Lemon in Kiama to Bomaderry. So I really, really enjoyed that. But at the time, we were also doing some major bids. And I had spent close to 6 years in Thales. And over the time, I met a lot of people. And look, one thing, you know me, Frank, I always like to sit and learn with people, with the experiences, right? Yeah. People like yourself. I've had some great mentors. I mentioned Steve Lemon, and also a gentleman called Julian Richards. And I met Julian at a conference, the Osrail conference, and we sort of I don't know what it was. We sort of unofficially started, it was like a mentor-mentee relationship, which I think we all need to have in this business. The rail industry is really small, and a lot of people love to share, which is that's a great thing. But once you can find a mentor you sort of work with, I think it's a good way to share across the industry. So I was doing that with Julian, and then he joined one of the big four consulting company, Deloitte. And I was trying to scratch my head because I thought, hang on a minute, this guy has done a lot of work in the transport business and the rail business. Why is he becoming an accountant? Because as a novice, not knowing what one of the big four consulting at the time, I did make the mistake that I just assumed they were, an accounting firm. But after another conversation, I said, this is something that I may want to pursue. And it was quite hard, to be honest, saying, leaving Thales, because when you work, when you're doing bids, and we spoke about that, when you're doing tenders, you're working with people 18 hours a day, right? Eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, sometimes sleeping over, and then eating breakfast again the next day. That's a lot of time spent. So it was a bit, but I had to make that call. I had to make the call in my career, and I do want to stress this point. I did take a sidestep in pay to take this role. Okay. Sometimes people, always say, if it's a new job, it has to be paid more. And I told myself, look, I'm going into something I don't know. So I don't have the legs to, money was not the concern at the time. The time was, I want to go and learn at this place. And it was a shock to me, right? Not to anyone else who knows consulting. It was a shock to me. So day one, here I'm sitting there. I've got my laptop. I've got everything ready. And normally in a company, when you join, day one is induction, right? It's induction. You go for some training, and you go and do those things. But for me, it was day zero, hour one. I was told you got to go and see your client because you're starting this afternoon. So it was a baptism of fire. The only saving grace was the client was Sydney Trains, which allowed me to use the relationship I had to settle in a little bit. because if it was somebody else, it would have been pandemonium, to be honest. So again, in my career, I've had which I won't have it any other way, been thrown in the deep end, because when I get thrown in the deep end, the only way is to claw your way up, right? Or you could sit down and cry down there, or you can claw your way up. I prefer always to try and claw my way up. So that's how the consulting arm came in, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the 2 years of consulting. And in the middle of that, I decided that now it's time. I wanted to go client side. And the reason I wanted to do a consulting firm before I went to client side, Frank, was almost to sanitize myself, if that makes sense, because I didn't want to go from a supplier to client, a client like transport, or client like Sydney Trains, because it's sort of, again, right or wrong, for me, I thought it would polarize my view. It would polarize my view in terms of the products I knew or the services I was aware of. I wouldn't be open, I guess, to hear from the rest of industry. So that actually allowed me to do that. And then I joined transport, and I joined part of the digital systems, where it was called automatic train control, ATCS business case with Steve Lemon. So I joined the business case. I was part of writing the business case, the technical plan of the roadmap. And once the business case was done, there was a job inside transport which I applied for, which was in the rail strategy space. I applied for that. I was successful, and then that sort of progressed me through a couple more roles in transport. But then evolving transport hit. I'm not sure if that was. I'm assuming that's quite a public. A lot of people have heard about the reorg that was done a couple of years ago when, if you remember, RMS was brought into transport, and they had brought in Greater Sydney and ROM and the client organization. So there was a lot happening there, and I sort of I didn't want to get too caught up in that. So I actually rang Jazz Tumba, who's now head of rail operations, and I said, "Have you got something for me?" And he said, "Look, I've got something in the Rock, some projects." So I went, I worked there at the Rock, and again, tremendous respect, to be honest, Frank, for the people on the control room floor. I've been on trains in Sydney where even if it's a few minutes late, you hear passengers quite angry. And look, I get it. People expect a good service. I do understand that, but when you're on the control room floor and you see the people operate, you see they're trying to get the best outcome, you have nothing else but respect for them. So, it was, again, a great learning of another side of the railway. And that comes to my current role and what I'm doing now. As you know, I've done technology stuff, in and around, dabbling in and around technology, railway technology, for a little bit. But when this role came up, this is no technology. This is asset infrastructure and timetable, which is the product of the railway. So I put my head in the ring, and I was lucky enough to win the job. And I've been learning ever since, to understanding the timetable, understanding how the timetable actually drives everything on the railway, from crew rosters to fleet management to customer journeys. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride. We've had COVID and the industrial action that has put some spanners in the works, but we're back now, and looking forward, ready to deliver for next year, which is getting ready for Metro. That's where the big time is.
Yeah.
So look, it's a very very condensed. I just realized preparing for this, to be honest, it's I'm close to 15 years, which I when I used to read someone's resume and say 20 years experience, I would be like, wow, I need to go talk to him or her. And I've crept up to 15 years now in the rail industry. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just for the benefit of the listeners, you should say again what your current role actually is. You just mentioned something about asset management and timetable, but that's not really the job title, is it?
Yeah, no. So look, for More Trains, More Services, I'm part of the operational integration team inside Sydney Trains. So the way I best explain it to people is you've got rail delivery and companies called incentivized delivery entities who are actually delivering the assets, and we are the ones who are going to catch it. We're going to catch it. We're going to make sure. Or myself and my team need to make sure that the business is ready to catch is ready to operate the assets, is ready to operate the timetable. We've got enough crew, we've got enough facilities. If the timetable changes, for example, if there's a certain station that you're going to have crew exchange, then is the meal room big enough? Are we ready for this timetable? So getting that ready is a year's work in planning. So the whole operational readiness side of things for Sydney Trains, that's where myself and my team come in.
Okay, so an operational readiness role, basically, for More Trains, More Services. And for those of you who don't know, More Trains, More Services is like a summary program to improve the capacity and performance on some of the key corridors in Sydney, on the Sydney Trains network, where it's particularly important. So basically the busiest corridors that need to be uplifted in terms of capacity. And I think eventually the idea is to introduce ETCS level 2 or the kind of ETCS level 2. I would call it an enhanced ETCS level 2. Sometimes I call it ETCS level 2 plus. What's currently being planned in Sydney by a program called Digital Systems. And I think eventually the idea is to roll out this ETCS solution on the busiest corridors of the network. But I believe in the meantime, until this is possible, More Trains, More Services is a lot about other improvements of the rail corridors to basically improve the operation and kind of prepare it for higher capacity. Yeah, maybe taking off some weaknesses of the network. If you have any, I don't know, permanent speed restrictions on the network, to basically upgrade the corridors, that those things go away. Maybe you can describe briefly what in your experience or in the parts of More Trains, More Services that you were involved, what are the kind of activities that are happening in order to uplift the timetable?
Yeah, and you've summarized that quite well. So in terms of the uplift, when there is an uplift in, say, you've got to get more trains on a certain sector of the network, we need to understand what assets there are currently and whether those assets are able to take those new services. That's where you have upgrades in terms of whether it's track infrastructure or even power upgrades. There's a lot of power upgrades that are that need to happen for. So part of the More Trains, More Services scope is also substations, building of substations. We also have a lot of maintenance centers. There is a lot of work that's done in maintenance centers such as Hornsby and Mortdale to get them ready. And again, this is where you've got a lot of interdependent projects, as you know, in any railway. You just mentioned one of those projects, which is the digital systems project. But one of the projects, of course, which has been quite in the media, is the introduction of the new intercity fleets as well. And if you look at the More Trains, More Services website, I think that's been updated now, but that was the intention as well. The intention was to have the NIFs relieve the Oscar fleet, so the Oscar will be cascaded back into suburban service. But again, we need to understand what that means now with post-industrial action. So it's been I think if I would take it from a day-to-day learning perspective, when I joined the project, I joined this project in June of 21, and we were preparing for a timetable to be received October, so in about 4 or 5 months. But nobody had planned for COVID. Nobody had planned for the length of the EBA negotiations, which has caused some delay. But a day-to-day activity is, for example, my role. I work with a client is Greater Sydney is the client for more trains, more services, and the deliverer is infrastructure in place. So they have a delivery organization, and I am the operator, part of the operator and maintainer. So you've got to ensure you're working with the deliverer and with Greater Sydney to understand that you've got all the right possessions in place. We've got all the, if there's additional crew or there's additional facilities or anything to do inside the maintenance center, that's all been planned for and getting ready. And things with the maintenance center, we've also got human factors, because there's a lot of work that we're introducing infrastructure that involves people and people to use that infrastructure. So we're making sure that from a human factors perspective, that's all as per the operational integration standards that were set by ASA. Sorry, I wasn't sure if it was mine or you, Frank. I think there was a little bit of a glitch there. It was just frozen for a little bit. I hope I'm still coming through okay.
Yeah, it's all looks good on my side. So well, I just got the yeah. No, I think it's all okay. Just keep talking. It's all good.
So that's where we are. So we had a scope. Now it's and now as you know, there is a new government in Sydney, and we just need to understand what the government priorities are. But look, the more trains, more services. It's a massive program. It's a $5.3 billion program. And part of the program has already delivered about 41 new Boreas Series 2 trains and a lot of additional weekly services since 2017. So it is a massive program. Now the focus for the program is around the Sydney Metro Phase 2, which is the City to Southwest services. So that's exciting. To be honest, it is exciting because as I just mentioned to you, I've sort of dabbled in the technology side. There's no technology here, so there's no comfort for me. As in, I'm sort of comfortable in a technology space. There is no way to hide here, which is good. There is a lot of learning, and it's and I'm doing some project management, which if I dive back to what I said before, where I didn't want to work on projects, and now I'm actually quite enjoying working on projects. Because no 2 days are the same. No 2 days are the same.
Yes. I mean, some people say the only place to grow is outside your comfort zone. And I think that's a true statement, even though it can be quite inconvenient at times. And in your case, there were several occasions where you basically shifted into a completely different environment. So what you talked about, your change from Thales to Deloitte, that sounded like one of those changes, and then coming back to transport and working in different roles there, the swap into the control systems area. But if I look at this from the outside, I think you just made a few pretty smart decisions at the time. So, for example, when you talked about going into the control center and doing some project work there, while at the same time basically getting a bit out of the way of this whole reorganization thing in Transport for New South Wales, which upended so many departments on so many roles. Yeah, so having something a bit offside during that time, where you can just keep working without being concerned whether you will still have a job in 6 months, or whether your department will be dissolved into something else, or suddenly you get a job, a boss, which is coming from road and maritime. There were many things happening in transport at the time where a lot of people got very frustrated. And I thought, when you just told us what you did during that time, that was pretty smart. Yeah, to just basically get out of the way. It's a bit like the surfer that sees a big wave coming. It's just diving underneath it and basically saves you from getting crushed. And that, to me, was kind of a bit what you did there, which was pretty smart. And and now you have basically achieved a very senior role at still a relatively young age. I mean, you mentioned 15 years of industry experience, but for making a career, that's not really that much, because the railway industry is not really well known for like lightning fast careers, if you will. Very often it's expected that you earn your laurels in some area, and then you learn your laurels somewhere else, and then you've got a relatively slow but very solid career path, so that you really know what you're talking about. But that can lead to quite a slow development of a career, and sometimes you just settle somewhere because I think you mentioned it quite well. You had no refuge in technology, but some people seek the refuge in technology, or seek the refuge in an area where they're just comfortable with, so inside the comfort zone. And and then they may just, maybe even unconsciously, miss out on a couple of promotion opportunities, and then all of a sudden the career is over, because they are considered, I don't know, maybe too old for further career steps, or maybe not enough interested or motivated, or whatever you want to call it. So I think you've done really well. I'd like to go a little bit more into this mentoring thing. I mean, I've heard this discussed several times, and for some people, a mentor seems to be the silver bullet. So I need a mentor, and then everything will be fine. And to me, that almost seems like they're looking for someone to hand over the responsibility for their career development, and their common sense thinking as well. So basically, this guy is my mentor, or this lady is my mentor, and she has so much more industry experience. So I'm basically doing everything that she says or he says, and then I will be fine. And if I'm not fine, then I have somebody to blame. So that's, in brackets, the afterthought. And I'm very curious about your experience there and how you approach this, because you seem to have a quite down-to-earth approach which regards to those mentors, like taking their advice seriously, but not basically handing over your brain for somebody else to decide your career, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, look, that's until a few couple of years ago, I thought mentoring is the only way, until I understood that there are different ways. So there's mentoring and there's coaching as well. So coaching is a very, if you can say, a more rigid process. So you've got a coach, and they give you actions and things like that. So, but mentoring is a bit more softer approach compared to coaching. And I always made sure that I never had one mentor. I had different mentors, because everyone has different styles. Everyone has different styles, and everyone has and everything I've heard has been good ideas. And then I try and say, all right, what because it took me a while to understand who I am as an individual, a professional, and now a people leader. It took me a bit of time, and now I'm starting to get that foundation of who that is. So now I can sort of start building on that foundation. But having those few mentors is good. Having one is a good start, but don't stop at one, right? And you need to have a diverse group of mentors. So for me, I make sure I have mentors who are both male and female, but I also have mentors who are just maybe 4 or 5 years in the industry, because they might have something, new ways of working that I could implement in what I'm doing today. So I don't have mentors who are just older to me, if that makes sense. I have mentors who are, age is not a barrier. If I find somebody who I really appreciate what they bring, I will start spending time with them and trying to understand and see how that would help me in my skill set, how that would help me, my team, then the organization and things of that sort. So for mentorship for me is an absolutely a brilliant thing. I think we all need to be doing, because the sharing of ideas, the connections you make are just brilliant. Again, that can only do good for for the industry, and it's helped me. And as I just said, I was able to make a decision based on the trust I had with one of the mentors, and I didn't blame that. Even if it didn't go well, I wouldn't blame that person, because it was my decision, right? Because I took that decision based on the information I received. I am currently at the point now. I am looking at getting coached as well. So that's where I am at currently. Maybe the next 6 months. I don't know if there's a part 2 of this series, but I can always come back and talk to you potentially about coaching, because it is a different thing. Mentoring and coaching is a very, very different thing. But till today, I've always got, I always catch up, try and make time to catch up with them, and I'm now in a quite a privileged position to actually be a mentor to other people as well. And it's a sacred relationship, to be honest. It's a very sacred relationship, and it's a lot of time that we need to put in, and you gotta ensure you're respecting the time of your mentee, and you're in there, you're focused, you're not checking emails while you're it is quite sacred relationship. Which everyone needs to.
And it goes in both directions. I think I indicated earlier that sometimes I have the impression that this term mentor is a bit too much put on a pedestal by some people. And so if somebody approached me and say, well, I want you to be my mentor, I would feel a lot of pressure to basically deliver, to do something special or highly intelligent or extremely valuable for that other person. So if I compare this, for example, with our relationship at Thales, where in hindsight, I probably did I did have some kind of a mentoring role for you, at least for a limited period of time, and in certain aspects of your career, of your professional development. But it was never, in my view anyway, it was never something formalized, and it was never something where I felt the pressure that I basically have to perform in any shape or form, or that I would become to some extent responsible for your career success. Yeah. And I think this is something where this whole mentoring concept really needs to be taken with a grain of salt. If you look at different areas of your life, you would certainly want a different teacher or a different trainer for your health and fitness program than you would want to have for your coaching or for your, and even though your fitness trainer may call himself a coach as well, because they basically do coaching in the health and fitness, while the kind of coaching that you need for your professional career is something entirely different. And in this case, it would be very obvious to everybody that clearly those need to be two different people with two different skill sets, and having two different persons for these tasks is absolutely normal. Now, I think the same applies with regards to just business mentors. You may want to talk to a different person regarding career development than you want to talk about leadership problems, or how to gain a foothold in an organization, or if the organization changes, that again may be a different thing. So I think your approach of having a number of different people that also change over time just makes a lot of sense, because you are growing out of the area of influence of certain people. And yeah, for example, if you had asked me after I left Thales and you left Thales, if you had asked me to give you advice on how to thrive in Deloitte, I wouldn't have told you, because I simply don't have this experience. I could have told you about my experience in other consultancies, which probably tick quite different than Deloitte would do. And so for that part of your career, I would have been completely unsuitable as a mentor to give you advice. And but there may be later options where you may come actually back to whatever, to me or to somebody else who mentored you previously, and say, well, wait a minute, for this particular problem there, if I basically look back at all the people that I talked to previously or got advice from previously, maybe that person back in whatever 2014 or so may be worth talking to. And be it just for catching up as we do now, and say, well, good to talk again after so many years. But you never know. Maybe, I mean, mentors develop as well. Yeah. So I'm not the same person anymore that I used to be, like back in 2010 at Thales. And so that means that people just develop over time. And the important bit is that at the end of the day, you make your own decisions. And you basically, you look carefully where you get your advice from. Yeah. So one thing I heard recently is you shouldn't get financial advice from someone who's broke or doesn't have a lot of money. And I thought that really hit it on the head. And that, like, asking somebody for tips on corporate careers, and that somebody is basically almost unemployable because I don't know, spent the last 10 years running his own company, for example. It's just a different.
And this is where the responsibility of the mentor comes in, and they need to be open to say, because I had this question recently to me by one of my mentees, and I said, look, I don't know, and it would be wrong for me to provide you any advice because I haven't faced that yet, but I know somebody who has, right? Yes. So I want you to go and reach out to them. So I made the introduction, and so then that spans their mentor network as well. So and this is where because I had that treatment, right? So when I asked the question, one of my mentors said, look, I haven't done this, but go and talk to John, and then it was great. Because not collectively we know everything, right? So,
yes, but one person claiming he knows it all, that normally doesn't work anyway. And it's quite a similar problem, or quite a similar challenge to what I have in the training courses that I'm doing. So if somebody asks me a certain question where I think I'm not best placed to give an answer, but I know some other party that knows it better, then I just say, well, look, talk to these people over there, because they are much better placed than I am to give you an answer on that. Yeah. So for example, what happens quite often is I get asked certain questions about specific products or so, yeah, for like ETCS or CBTC or something like this. And I said, you know what? You sit on client side, you can talk to the suppliers every day of the week and ask them for information, ask them that questions. And why would you expect me to tell you more about a certain ETCS product than the manufacturer of that very product? It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. So I mean, I'm trying to do my best to basically don't leave too many gaps. Like if you constantly say, I don't know this, I don't know that, then people say, well, why do I get training from this guy anyway? But where it makes common sense to basically talk to somebody else who's much better placed to answer that question or solve that problem, then quite happy to do that. And I think every person in a senior role should have this humility to say, hey, I'm not perfect, I don't know everything, but I have a network, I know other people, and if I don't, then I'm just admitting it. I say, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this. Yeah.
Good. That's true.
So, where do you see yourself in the future? That's one of those I don't know, standard questions, but I don't have standard questions in my podcast. But it just came into my mind. You seem to have a quite conscious career path where certain decisions you made were quite strategic. For example, not going straight from a signaling supplier to client side, but having that sidestep via the consultancy. That was a pretty conscious decision and a very forward-looking strategic decision, and even sacrificing some part of your salary in doing that sidestep. So have you got any plans for the next 5 or 10 years? Because I mean, you're certainly still young enough to not say, okay, well, I reached the end position of my career, and this is going to run for another 30 years. Thank you very much.
No. I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and that's what I'll try and keep picking things I would enjoy doing. But for me, and that's why I mentioned the coaching bit, because I was reflecting over the break, and what next, and I said, all right, I think it's time to start putting at least the skeletons of a 5 and 10 year roadmap. And when I asked myself that question, I sort of hit a dark room, and which is where I am currently investigating into helping myself coach, because I getting a coach to help me do that. And hence the mention of the series 2 of this conversation, because that's what the next 6 months is I've met a few coaches. I just need to understand who would be the right one for me to help me in that next, architecting the next 5 and 10 years. And I know, people say, oh, don't you want to be X or C level? I said, for me, it's not the title of the role. It's, again, understanding where how can I be still true to myself and provide that impact. And that's why I just consciously now, the next 6 months is to do that, is to actually start putting in a bit more detailed 5-year, but a slightly looser 10-year. And like one of the things, to consider is, do I still want to be in Sydney, or do I want to go interstate, or do I want to go overseas? I haven't explored that yet. And hence I need to start bringing those in the mix now. And hence I thought now is a good time where I'm at to sort of start thinking of those. And once I do that, I'm happy to chat about that journey, because it takes time. It's not something that you say, all right, in the next 3 months I hope that job comes on Seek or on some job platform and I apply for it. So I'm not doing. I don't want to go down that path. I want to be able to be in a position where hopefully I could choose where I would like to go.
Yes. Yeah. The mobility outside Sydney. I mean, I don't want to talk you into something, but for me at the time it was really a great change to move from Sydney to Perth, even though a lot of people in Sydney did not understand it one bit why I did this and how I could possibly do something like this. But for me personally at the time, Sydney became quite congested, and I could feel it very much in the area where I lived, which developed very strongly and which changed very rapidly, and in my view at least not for the better. I mean, some people may celebrate if the shopping center is being built right basically 2 blocks away from their home, but in my case it was just disadvantages over disadvantages. Like you some roads got redirected. You basically couldn't leave your home and go back into traffic the way that you were used to, and well, a number of things like paid parking on the beaches and a number of things that are simply not there in Perth yet. And I hope it will take a long time until this is happening. So over here, it's much less busy. It's not as hectic, I would say. Everything is a bit slower, which is probably the main criticism if Sydney-siders think about Perth, or people from Melbourne think about Perth. It's a similar thing for that matter. But I personally quite like it in this stage of my career, and and it was just a great move. Now that doesn't mean I want to get you over to Perth, but looking at different parts of the world at some stage can be a very good thing. I mean, obviously, before I was in Australia, I worked in Europe, in various countries there. I did some time in China, which was extremely enlightening, I would say, with an amount of work that I would never want to repeat in my life. But all of those things, it's like having various different jobs in different companies with different employers. They basically all contribute to a wider horizon, shall we say? And the wider that horizon becomes, the more you expand your comfort zone, and the more you can say, okay, well, I've done this before, so it's not entirely new. I've done that before, and the one over there I've done as well. So it's just harder to be thrown off guard if you have that many legs to stand on where you've got already experience. And interesting. I mean, just the fact that you do think about those things like a 5-year roadmap or a 10-year roadmap probably positions you quite well to remain being successful in the career and to remain liking what you're doing, because that's always a good thing that you say, well, you like what you do at the moment, and if something better comes up, then you may still want to change, but in the meantime, at least you're not like suffering. You're basically enjoying where you are, and you can be grateful for where you are, and I think that's another I would say secret to job satisfaction, to just appreciate where you are and what you do. All right, so I think you gave me a hook a couple of times that we may have a continuation of this at some point in the future. I think coaching in the transport industry would certainly be a thing that's of interest, that you don't get to hear so often, because many people just don't want to talk about it, that they need a coach in the first place, because some people may consider this to be, I don't know, a weakness or something like this, which I think is complete rubbish. But yeah, I could imagine if there's something new to talk about, then I would certainly be interested, and I will certainly keep watching your further career path. So congratulations, how far you've made it until now. You're now in the position that I can ask you for work, which I may consider after the interview. So let's see how this works. Any last thing you want to add? Any advice you want to give for the listeners out there or so?
Look, for me, when it comes to, I think you've mentioned this as well. Don't be comfortable, especially for young grads who are coming into the rail industry. Don't just be comfortable and ask questions. That's what I always did. I always was curious. How does this work? Or it could be a technology side of things, of how does the technology work, or business side of things. How does the business work? How does this business calculate its P&L, or why anything? Always be curious. And I think that's I still am. I still ask a lot of questions, because I do want to. I genuinely just want to understand how it works. Because I don't want to assume things. I think that would be my last one. Just ask questions continuously. Just keep asking. Don't assume and stay quiet. And I think we're doing a lot of that now in virtual rooms because of COVID. a lot of people are staying quiet on meetings, which I think needs a bit of shake-up. Hopefully, we shake that up a little bit. Because I do that for my team. I do go around and ask individually if you've got some questions, so just so they are participating. But I think that's a thing we need to, as an industry, keep curious, keeping curious.
Yes, yeah. Curiosity is certainly a great recommendation for people. There's this saying, "Curiosity killed the cat," but fortunately, we are not cats; we're humans, so we can be curious, and we should be curious. One thing I might want to add when you said we should keep doing something that we feel maybe uncomfortable with. One of my online mentors, if you will, or one of the persons that I listened to for quite a while, he coined the phrase "uncomfortable action" as a secret to success. And there's a lot of truth in that, because that uncomfortable action really takes you, as the name implies, takes you out of your comfort zone and takes you towards growth and towards progress. And growth and progress are main contributors to happiness, to job satisfaction, and to personal happiness as well. You just feel much better when you think that your life is progressing. You're moving forward. You're moving towards something better. You start getting better than you were yesterday or last week or so. And uncomfortable. The combination of being uncomfortable and execute, so action something. That's really quite a magical combination, I think, to really get forward in life and in career.
That is really good.
All right, with those wise words, I'd like to thank you for your time. I enjoyed it a lot to talk to you again, and I can well imagine that this wasn't the last time. Well, not the last time, but maybe also not the last time on this podcast series. So far, I haven't had a guest there twice, but I mean, I'm still in the early days, and even some of the biggest podcasters there are in the world, they have guests repeatedly if it just keeps being worthwhile talking to them. And in your case, I think I'm pretty certain it will be worthwhile to have a part 2 at some point in time. So thanks very much. And for all the listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And as usual, if you like it, then subscribe and download, share it with your friends, and have a look at the other episodes as well, because I personally think they're all awesome. Yeah. Thanks very much. And as usual, keep it simple, and bye for now.
Thank you, Frank.
Hi, it's Doc Frank again, real quick before you head off. If you are a fan of communications-based train control, or short CBTC, there's an event coming up in September that you absolutely don't want to miss. It's the first virtual global CBTC conference. It's called CBTC World Summit 2023, and it's happening on the 20th and the 21st of September. There will be 3 sessions of about 6 hours duration each for 3 different global regions, one for Asia Pacific, one's for North and South America, and one's for Europe and the Middle East. So wherever you are in the world, one of those sessions will be during the daytime in your time zone, and you can watch it live for the full 6 hours with 6 presentations. The kicker about this is that all other presentations, including the ones from your own session, will be available for replay via recordings. So that means that if the other session should be in the middle of your night, you can still watch it on demand at a time that's more convenient for you and doesn't interfere with your good night's sleep. The conference is available for registration right now at my training portal under docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I'm putting a lot of effort into this conference. It will be an absolute blockbuster event, and I very much hope to see you there. Until then, keep it simple and bye for now. Hey, Doc Frank here, host of the Rebel Conversations podcast. Thank you for listening.